Good morning, sunshines. All right, another exciting week. All right, a couple of you still have not sent me your paint elevations. In other words, the colored in version of your walls that we drafted before spring break. So please get those in. A couple of you have already sent me your pictures of your finished model. Thank you very much. You're ahead of the game. Everybody's looking like they're doing very well. Again, on Thursday, for those of you who haven't yet sent the finished model in, you want to color in and you want to draw a draft the other walls of your set, color them in the way you colored in the first wall, and then tape everything together, glue everything together, however you want to put it all together, put it onto a firm, solid background floor. Again, I sent you copies or a picture of the couch and the chairs and the person that you can cut out and just print and use those and color those in as well. Again, if you want to do some more research and use your couches and chairs and radios and whatever from your research, great. I'm just giving you some choices that you can make without having to do any additional research. But on Thursday, your finished model for Lost in Yonkers is due. And again, that's 2 weeks late. You've got 2 weeks extra to work on it. So please get that finished. Now, the final project, again, last Thursday, I sent you 3 videos of 3 different shows. Miss Julie, Waiting for Godot, and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. I need you to watch one of those 3 and do an analysis on it. That is going to be your paper number 3. Yes? Now, you could also choose, let's say you chose to write your analysis on Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. You could then also choose to have that play be your final project because you've already had to watch it, you already know it, and your final project can be any play other than Lost in Yonkers for you to design the set for. And one of the things about all 3 of those shows I sent you last week, they're all one set shows. Again, make it easy on yourself. Now, for the final project, next week I'm going to send you a ground plan of the theater again. And so what I need you to do for the final project, there are 3 things I need you to do. One is to research the play. You can go and research the author, you can research particular details. For instance, in Waiting for Godot, there's a tree. You can show me what the tree looks like, that sort of stuff. In Miss Julie, it happens in a 19th century kitchen. You can show me what a stove looked like, do research on that. So practical research is fine. You can do me research on past productions of the show. So if you want to show me past productions of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and how it was designed, that's one part of the final project research. The second part is your ground plan. On the ground plan I'm going to send you, I just need you to draw out where the ground plan for your set for your show is going to be. Again, it doesn't have to be one of the 3 I sent you, it could be another show. Do your research on the show, do your ground plan on the show, and then the third thing is either a sketch or a model. I would love for it to have color, but I'm not going to demand it because that's as far as we got in the class. So you can sketch it out and show me what it looks like just sketching it out. You can model it out. You can do a little white model, or you can do a full scale model, full half-scale model, half-inch scale model for the show. That would be ideal. So those are the 3 things we're going to need for your final project, yes? Again, we're only going to have 2 weeks to do the final project, which is the normal amount of time a person would have to design a set. So I don't feel bad about forcing you to get that information out and back to me in that time period, because when you normally get a job hired as a set designer, that's the kind of job time you have. We took a long time with Lost in Yonkers so we could concentrate on each step. But the final project is going to happen over a 2-week period, and it's wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. So get ready. The farther you are, for those of you who've already finished the model for Lost in Yonkers, go ahead and get started on your final. Even if you haven't finished, go ahead and do the analysis of one of those plays that I sent you last week for paper number 3. Yes. Now, moving on this Thursday, not only is your final model for Lost in Yonkers due now, but also I need you to send me a copy of your resume. I need all of you to try and do a theatrical resume. If you have another resume for another field, fine, but I want you to try and do a theatrical resume as if you were applying for a job this fall. Yes, this summer most theaters are closed because of the virus, but we want a theatrical type of resume. I'm going to give you several sort of rules about the resume. A lot of you already have it. Great. Update it. Send it to me. That should be hopefully an easy project for those of you, especially if you've had my class before, because I require a resume in all my classes. There are 3 parts to the resume. First of all, the major rule in theater, a resume is 1 page, 1 side. Yes? There have been people that I know that have been working on Broadway for 30 years, and their resume is 1 page, 1 side. If they've been doing it that long and can put it all on 1 page, so can you. Yes? I can't tell you the number of times when people have filled out resumes, sent them into places, and when they open the packet, I've seen the producers just take the resume and throw it directly in the trash. Because if you can't follow that simple rule, 1 page, 1 side, you're not going to be worth dealing with. Yes? The rules of the theater are 1 page, 1 side. The reason is because you should have, during the course of a year, you should do so many shows that your resume becomes obsolete. The resume I'm going to show you, I did 2 years ago. Half of these shows are no longer even on my resume. It just happens to be the one that I had saved last on my computer before I came down today. But I did Shrek in 2018. It's already 2020. I've done a dozen shows since then. So your resume will turn over quickly if you're a working professional. Yes? And that's what you want to be. And it also takes somebody who is looking at your resume a half second. Trust me, you look at enough resumes, you know exactly what you're looking at. People that are college students have a certain level of education, a certain amount of training, you get what you expect. Yes, people who've been working professionally for 10 years should have a better resume than that person in college. Sometimes they don't. Yes, but the 3 parts of the resume are the header, which is where you're going to tell me who you are and how to get in contact with you. The body is the second part, which is going to tell me what you've done. And then the information at the bottom is what I'm going to call filler. It can be just as important as the body, but really it's there just to give a sense of the type of thing you've done in order to do the body of the work. Yes? Again, I'm going to show you my resume as an example. I'm not saying it's perfect, but at least you'll have something to go on. First of all, in the theater, your name is your business. Yes? My name is Mike Winkleman. That's how people know me. They may know me as Wink, but my wife hates that, so I don't say that. I don't put it on my resume, but a lot of people will put their nickname on their resume because that's how Ogre, for instance, those of you know Ogre, my guess is you don't know his real name, and I'm not going to tell you because he would hurt me, but he goes by Ogre. That's his name. Yes, on his resume it says Ogre. Yes, you need to have, now again, in the world today, having a physical address can be scary. I understand that. I'm not scared, so I put my physical address because it's just easier. If you have it may well be worth your while to rent a post office box. There are places like mailbox, little side places where they'll rent you a mailbox and give you a post office box, but you can get one from the Postal Service. The Postal Service mailbox is going to cost you about $100 a year. But again, every year you renew it, you've got to access, and that can be your work address, which again, when we talk about taxes in a second, can be a very helpful thing to have a separate work address. Yes. At any rate, it's your call. We need to give them some way to contact you to send information to you, and it needs to be semi-permanent. Even if you put your address, if you're just living there right now, you might also put a permanent address, like your mother or father's address, because these resumes go in files. And let's say this year they were looking for a prop person and you were like on their list, but they hired all the rest of their prop people and didn't get to you. Next year they hired their prop people, and then suddenly somebody breaks an arm. And they need somebody now to come in and fill the prop duties. So I promise you there's a file folder that says prop people, and your resume is going to be in it, and they may call you and say, hey, have you got something for the summer? We just had somebody come up, something happened, and we need a prop person for this summer, and they're going to call that information from last year's or maybe 5 years ago resume. So the information in your resume needs to be pretty permanent, because I've seen it happen. You think I'm teasing, but it does happen where people have contacted 5 years after they applied to the place because they wind up in a file folder somewhere that people enjoy, would have hired them had they not had the other people that they hired. Yes, telephone numbers, cell phone numbers. Again, I understand that can be somewhat questionable, but I don't think that shouldn't be that bad. But again, you need to have some sort of way, email address specifically. That's an easy one to give. Again, I wouldn't make it your fun email address. You can create a Gmail account with something that's a serious sounding email. It shouldn't be, igetlaid.com or whatever, gmail.com. It should not be a fun email. It should be an email address that looks professional and is a professional email address. And because, of course, you're dealing with a business. So again, the amount of things that go in the header, a lot of times are going to depend upon how much information you have in the body of your resume. You could also, as an actor, put things like height, like weight, hair color, eye color. If you're somebody who's going up for modeling, you might want to put your hat size, your glove size, your dress size. If you're a singer, I would put your vocal range. If you don't know what your vocal range is, you are not a singer. Period. People who are singers know their vocal range. Yes? Now, are you someone who can sing? Great. But you are not a singer, a trained singer. So when people says, are you a singer? The answer is, I can carry a tune, but I have never been trained. Because if you say yes, they will say, what is your vocal range? And if you don't know your vocal range, you have just lied to them. Yes? I'm putting a big period here because it happens all the time. And as soon as you lie to somebody who's hiring you, they stop listening to you. Yes? They have moved on to the next person. They're going to see 1,000 people in a day, or have 1,000 resumes in a day. You don't want to deal with people who lie to you. You want people who are truthful, who are honest, who you can trust to be and do who and what they say. Yes? Now, that leads us to the body of the work. In theater, you always want to list things from the most recent to the least recent, to the farthest away. The reason is, let's say you played Dolly Levi and Hello Dolly in high school, and you're now a junior in college, and all you've done is a couple of spear chucker roles and maybe an understudy role. If you list Hello Dolly from high school and you're obviously in your third year of college, you've even damned yourself more than you would have been had you just listed the understudy and the spear chucker roles before Hello Dolly. Everybody gets to be a star in high school, then goes to college and works their way up to be a star in college, and then goes and works their way up to be a star in the real world. Very few people have the chutzpah to start off in Hello Dolly in all those levels. Yes? And so when you're writing your resume, you want to have the most recent thing you've done. If the most recent thing you've done was an understudy, put it down. Now, the joy of these things, first of all, if you have more than 3 experiences in any one element. So for instance, let's say you've acted in 3 shows or more. You can then pull that out and say acting experience and list your acting experience separately from your tech theater experience, or vice versa. If you've been a stage manager for 3 shows or more, pull that out. Please say stage manager for these shows, and then other theatrical experience, which could list your acting and working on props and painting sets, all other stuff. And you can also cater your resume to your job. If you found a job application that says we need scene painters, pull out your painting experience and say I painted these 5 sets, and then also list on there the number of shows you've done props and stage manager and acted in, because you never know when they've hired the right number of scene painters, but they also need a prop person, or they also need an assistant stage manager, or they also need somebody who can understudy a role who has those experiences so that they can work as an intern during the day in the prop department and at night be an understudy for somebody who has to go on the show. List all those things. Theatrical experience. If you only have one or two experiences in every level, just say theatrical experience. And then other experience, you've worked at a bank, you worked at McDonald's, you worked at wherever, other work experience, yes? If you have never ever worked in the theater, in this class, you will have designed the sets for 2 shows. You can list Lost in Yonkers, set designer, classroom project. That's one thing you can say. It will say your most recent one will be your final project. So let's say Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, set designer, classroom project. Right? That's the theater you did it, a classroom project. So everybody in this classroom will have, in this class, has at least 2 theater experiences. Now again, if you have a dozen theater experiences where you don't need to list your classroom experiences, great. Don't list it. Then you can say selected theater experience, yes? And selected other experience, yes? Once you have built beyond a dozen or so experiences in the theater. Now, a lot of times you do more than one thing on a show. I would list each of those things separately. If you work the box office, but you also help paint the set, but you also understudied a role, that's 3 different entries, right? Box office manager, set painter, scenic artist, and then understudy for whatever role. That's 3 different experiences. You've done 3 different types of things on the same show. I would, a lot of resumes suggest that you write down a goal. I would only write the goal if your experience is not in theater. If you're someone who is in their 30s and you've never done any theater other than classroom, I would explain to the person who's looking at your resume why it is that you're in your mid-30s and haven't done anything in theater. And therefore you can say your goal is, I've always been a housewife and started looking at getting employment, and I've decided that theater is what I want to do. Great. Otherwise, your goal is to get the job, and that's just a waste of time and space and everybody's energy, right? So if you have enough experience that you can list some theater experience, again, 3 or 4 shows is enough experience to say theater experience as opposed to other work experience. Yes? Anyway, you may need to do other work experience to explain what it is you've been doing or have, if you've ever had a job, because having at least some proof that you were able to show up at 8 o'clock in the morning and not be late and have references to those things are important. Now, the rule of thumb for me, if you've done the entire play, for instance, if you did a scene in a we do these shows every fall where you do a little monologue or a little scene from a show. I would put the character and the show in quotes because you've done a scene from that show, but you haven't done the whole show. You haven't been, if you did Hamlet in Hamlet at, the year we did Shakespeare, whatever that show was called, It'll Do, I don't know what it was called. But you write Hamlet, but when you put the title, you put it in quotes because you didn't do the whole play, you just did a scene from it. If you've done the role in the entire play, even if you've understudied it, I would write it and underline the show, underline the name of the show, the whole thing. Put the title, and then beside the name of your character, beside the name of your character, just in the parentheses, say understudy. Now, if you ever went on, you did the role. Even if you were the understudy for the role, the day that somebody was sick or broke their foot or whatever, and you went on in that role, you have done that role. So, for instance, not to pick on her, but Faith went on during a high school performance of Measure for Measure. She has played Isabel in Measure for Measure, even though she was just the understudy. Yes, but she did it. She did that role in front of that. It's very memorable in my estimation. So that counts. Yes. So that's the body of your paper, of your resume. Then the filler can be things like, well, first of all, you're all currently attending Auburn University Montgomery with an expected graduation date of whatever year you think you're going to graduate. Some people are going to graduate 2020. Some people are going to graduate 2021. You may not know when you're going to graduate. I would put it within the next 4 years, even though it may not be the next 4 years. You can at least expect to graduate in the next 4 years. But then where you went to high school, if you have your high school degree, if you have an associate's degree from somewhere, list that. If you've ever gone to SETC and done a training in juggling, you can list those: training in juggling, training in scene painting, training, whatever you've trained that's some way beyond your college experience can go in the filler at the bottom. Education, I would put forefront. After that, you can have things like special skills, like you can juggle. Again, I wouldn't put it down unless you are solid, firm that you can do it. Because I promise you, if you're in an interview and somebody says, oh, you can juggle, here's 3 balls, they do it all the time. And if you just go 1, 2, 3 and drop it, you can't juggle. Okay? So I wouldn't put it on there because it's just going to tempt them to make you juggle. Now, if you can juggle like the wind, great. Put juggling on there. Sometimes, again, it depends on who you're applying for. Sometimes driving a car is a special skill. Driving a motorcycle, special skill. You just sort of depends on who you're applying for and all that sort of stuff. Another thing you can use for filler, and again, this can sort of take up half your resume, is your references. The rule of thumb is 3 references. Don't just list one. One says I can't find 2 other people to do my reference. If you list 4 or 5, if you're trying to blow smoke. If you're going to list any, list 3. Now, by the time you list a name, an address, contact information, all that sort of stuff, by the time you put a 12 font, by the time you double space in between, all that sort of stuff, 3 references can easily take up a third, if not more, of your resume. So if all you have is a header that's got some filler in it, like your dress size and your vocal range, all that sort of stuff, you have 3 or 4 things you've done in the theater, and you have your references, that could be a complete top to bottom resume. Yes? And it's your choice. You want to make it look good. A. B. Spell things correctly, especially show titles. Hello Dolly is hello, comma, Dolly with an exclamation point. That's the way you spell it. Figure out how to spell the shows you've done. Yes? And because people know this sort of stuff. And it just looks bad if you misspell things. Cool. Again, if you have any questions, please send me questions. If you have a resume you want me to look over before you turn it in, I'll be glad to. But on Thursday, I need you all to send me your theater resume. Yes? All right. Now we're going to talk about your fun subject, taxes. Yay, taxes. All right. First of all, I'm not a tax attorney. I'm going to go through this form with you because it's not as scary as it seems. And somebody in your life should have told you how to do taxes. So I'm going to tell you how to do it. First of all, the first form is what's called a 1040. Back in the day, 2 years ago, there used to be 3 forms. There used to be a 1040A, a 1040EZ, and a 1040. They've gotten rid of the A and the EZ. They don't exist. Everybody fills out a 1040. Yes? You want to make sure you're filling out for the correct tax year. This is 2019 that you're filling it out for. We're 2020 in the real world. You want to fill out your filing status. Are you single? Are you married? Are you married filing separately? Are you head of household? Are you qualifying widower? My guess is most of you are single. You want to put your name, your address, all that should be easy. You want to know your social security number. If you're married filing jointly, you put your spouse's social security number there too. Now, for people who are married, if each of you makes about the same amount of income, it's just as easy to file together. If you are married and one of you makes 90% of the income and the other one makes nothing, it can be advantageous to have to file separately, because the person who makes very little will get a refund on their half, whereas the person who makes a lot of that, and again, I'm talking about if it's more 80-20. If one person makes 80% of the income and the other person makes 20% or less, it may be worth filing separately. If you're pretty much 60-40, 50-50, it washes out, maybe $1 here, $1 there. But again, you can file whichever form is most advantageous to you. You can put any number anywhere, as long as you report it. You can put it anywhere, whatever is most advantageous to you. Yes? So, standard deduction. If you can be claimed as a dependent, and my guess is most of you can, check that box. If your spouse is also a dependent, what that means is that somebody else, your parents, pay more than 50% of your housing, your food, they pay for college. Anybody that can claim you as a dependent on their tax form, you are a dependent. Now, it used to be worth more than it is. Now, you might want to discuss with your parents, because they only get a $500 decrease in their taxes. It used to be more than that, but they have since gone down, so it really only means $500 off the taxes to them. And as well, it doesn't really matter for you as far as what you'll see. You list your dependents. If you have children, you get $500 per child under 18 that you pay more than 50% of their income or their housing. All right, number 1, wages, tips, salaries. There are 3 different ways you can report income we're going to talk about. One of them is here. Again, you can, as long as you report the income, doesn't matter where you report it, just as long as you report it somewhere. For anyone who has made less than $12,200, let me make sure I'm right on that. Your standard deduction is $12,200. If you have made less than $12,200, write that figure there, go down to where it says standard deduction, subtract it, add it to less than 0, you pay 0 in taxes. You don't even have to file. But my guess is, let's say you're a student assistant and you made less than $12,000, $12,200. The Auburn University Montgomery has still taken taxes, withholding taxes, out of your check. And the only way to get that money back is to file your taxes. So even though, let's say you made $10,000 as a student assistant, which none of you did, you would still have to file, even though you don't have to file because the federal government says you don't have to file unless you make more than $12,200. If you don't file, you don't get the $200 or $400 or whatever it is they took out of your taxes for withholding. You have to file in order to get the withholding sent back to you as a refund. So just because you don't have to file doesn't mean you won't file. Yes, does that make sense? All right. Now, there's a couple tax credits for students we're going to talk about in a second, but for the most part, you can't make less than zero. So let's say you've made $10,000, your standard deduction is 12.2. You don't get minus 2,200, you get zero. It says if it's less than zero, enter zero. That's the rule. Yes. Now, let's say you've made more than $12,000, and someday you will. You have to put that amount of money in line 1. Now, there are two ways that employers can report income to you. One is through a W-2, and what happens with the W-2 is that they also have taken FICA and Medicare out of your taxes. And as an employer, they have matched those donations to your eventual retirement. If you work on a system that pays you W-2, you can get the withholding tax back. You can never get the FICA and the Medicare back. Yes? Another way that an employer can report your income is through what's called a 1099. You are an employee in name only. Really what you are is a subcontractor. Yes? Which means that you're a business owner. Yes? And the other way to report income, as opposed to reporting in line 1, is to report it on what's called a Schedule C, which we'll talk about. Let's talk about it now. A Schedule C, go ahead and flip back here. A Schedule C is a business, if I can find it. I know it's easier for coding because you can just cut to it. Profit and loss from a business, yes? Now, really the government would like for you to create your own business and have what's called a federal employee identification number. That is something you have to apply to the Social Security Administration for, and they'll send you one. But you can use your Social Security number, that's fine. There are many people do it, I do use it, Val uses it. As scene designers, as costume designers, we work for the Alabama Shakespeare Festival, for the Texas Shakespeare Festival, for West Virginia Public Theater, for Chicago theaters. Wherever we work and people pay us money, we are independent contractors, and those people send us 1099s. Many of you have worked for me at First Tech. I send you a 1099. You have to make more than $600, and if you make more than $600, I'll send you a 1099. If you make less than $600, I don't send you a 1099, and the government doesn't know. Should you report that? Absolutely. I can't tell you a lie. Nobody knows. Yes, so you can report it or not. Anyway, on your profit and loss statement from business, you see where it says gross sales, gross receipts. You can have a W-2 or a 1099, put it in line 1. So let's say you worked as a student assistant and made $10,000 and worked in a summer stock company and made $5,000 in the summer. That's more than $15,000 or $15,000, which is more than 12.2, so you have to report your income because you have to, as long as you're over 12.2, you got to top fill one of these things out. I would put $10,000 because they sent you a W-2 for your student assistant work, and then because probably the theater company is going to pay you in 1099 for the summer, I would put that here. And the reason why I put it on Schedule C is because Schedule C gives you the advantage of taking off any cost that it costs you to run your business. So for instance, let's say you live in Montgomery, Alabama, and you get a job in Blowing Rock, North Carolina. Anything you have to spend that you would not normally have spent money for, and even some things you would, from the moment you leave, let's say you leave May 1st to go to North Carolina to do this tweetsy job that lasts for 100 days. When you leave on May 1st, the clock starts ticking. Every mile you drive, it's 57.5 cents a mile. Yes? Let's say it's 500 miles from here to Blowing Rock. It's close. By the time you drive there and drive back, that's 1,000 miles. That's $575 off, which you can take off on Schedule C, Form 2106. Again, just it's easier for Cody to cut to it than it is for me to find it. But employee business expenses, right there. Enter the vehicle expenses, line 22. If you flip to the back side, it's got amount of miles. Enter the day your vehicle was placed in service. It's the day you bought it. Total miles you drove, guesstimate. How many miles did you drive from Tweetsy to North Carolina back? 1,000 miles. multiply that by 57.5 cents a mile, 58 cents a mile, that's $580 that you put off, you take off on line 22, you put it there on travel expenses on line 24A, and then that comes off the $5,000 you put on line 1. So now you only have $4,500 of income because you've taken off your mileage. Now, you can also take off the meals. I said you're there for 100 days. You're in North Carolina for 100 days. While you're there, if they provide you food, you wouldn't necessarily do this, but I don't know if they provide you food. And so you have to pay for your own meals. You would not have normally had to pay for your own meals. Keep receipts. Now, gas receipts are fine to show that you were traveling, but they come in, they're useless as far as taxes. And for mileage, they use the standard mileage rate of 58 cents per mile, which is great because it includes some idiot has figured out how much it costs for tire usage and oil changes and all that stuff and computed it all into 58 cents a mile. Trust me, it doesn't cost, if you have especially nowadays with $1.50 a gallon gas, you get 30 gallons to a gallon of gas, it's going to cost you less than 5 cents a gallon of a mile, but you're getting 58 cents a mile, so it works out for your favor. Any day that you're there, you have what's called a standard per diem rate. You go to this place called gsa.com, and if you're in a big city like Chicago, it's more than this. But the standard per diem rate for food in America today is $55 a day. So if you're there for 100 days at $55 a day, that's $5,500. You have $500 in travel expenses for driving. That's $6,000. You only made $5,000. That means on Schedule C, you can show a loss of $1,000. So you have gone from making $15,000 here on line 1 to making $10,000 on line 1 and losing $1,000 on Schedule C, which is on Schedule 1. Let me make sure it's Schedule 1. Yeah. If you go to Schedule 1, adjustments to income, you see line 3, business income or loss, Schedule C. You write $1,000 loss on line 3, you carry that down to the bottom, and on the 1040 line 7A, where it says other income, you lose $1,000. So now the amount of income you're reporting here is $9,000, even though you made 15. See how that works? So you want to use the Schedule C and the business in order to take off expenses. Now, again, when you subtract the 12.2, it becomes 0, you owe 0 taxes, even though you made $3,000 more than the minimum you could have made in order to pay taxes. That's why Schedule C's are great ways of doing that. Yes? Now, you can also eventually have an S corporation, which is Schedule E. I did not include that in your materials because if you have to actually get a lawyer to apply for a Schedule E S corporation, an LLC, a limited liability company. You have to get a business license. But let's say you, in the coronavirus, you start making masks. That's what people are, and you find a source, you go to Baptist Hospital and say, listen, I can make you 10 masks a day, I'll give you 50 masks a week, you pay me $10 a mask, that's $500 in income that you're making, yes? And you do it week after week after week, and $25,000 if you do it every week of the year, that's enough to live on for a lot of people, yes? You could make that, and I would make that a business, because then you can go in and take off the cost of the material. You can take off other things that are valuable to S corporations, to LLCs, but that's a Schedule E. That's the third way you can report income. But again, I'm talking to you, and my guess is you're not at the point to do that yet. But someday when you are, let me know. I'll help you file one. We'll get a lawyer together and we'll file for that. Cool. So again, you either report your income on line 1 of 1040 or line 1 of Schedule C. You can then deduct expenses. Now, again, keep receipts. On Schedule C, once you get past 0, well, you can see that even though we're already lost $1,000 on Schedule C, having just the mileage and the meals, yes? You can also deduct things like if you had to have headshots. If you pay somebody to take your headshot, you're advertising. If you pay somebody to print some business cards or letterhead, those are all business expenses. You wouldn't have done it if you weren't trying to be an actor or a technician or whatever it is. Whatever you buy, if you have to buy some paintbrushes as a scenic artist, if you have to buy a certain type of suit or something for your audition, clothes for your audition, all those are expenses that you incurred because of the business. All those are tax deductible, yes? And so again, all those in a Schedule C can come off. If you don't like filing a Schedule C, you can also file a Schedule A, which is the itemized deduction. The problem is your itemized deduction is $12,200. And it's really hard, even using the per diem and all that other stuff, it only got up to $5,000, $6,000. And so this is a way, using the Schedule C is a way to get your standard deduction and to itemize all those other things off your taxes. Yes, so you get the double whammy. Yes. Now I'm going to point out a couple of lines to you, just because they're important. And you may not, your parents may need to know about this too. First of all, on your schedule, let's see, the Schedule C, where is it coming? On your credits, Schedule 3, there is a line, education credits, Form 8863, Schedule 3, line 3. You can get I think it's $250, but it may be more, and there's all kind of expenses. It also depends on your income, but you can get some amount of money back for education expenses. There's a tuition and fee deduction. Let's see, where's the tuition and fee deduction? Anyway, somewhere on Schedule 1, 2, or 3, there's a deduction for tuition. Oh yeah, Schedule 1, line 21. Auburn University of Montgomery, if you paid any kind of tuition, they're going to send you a form. I forgot the name of the form, but they're going to send you a form telling you how much tuition and fees you paid. You can deduct up to a certain amount. Again, depends if you fill out a Form 8917, but you can deduct your tuition and fees from your income. Yes. There's also a way to deduct what are called education expenses. For those of you, when you get a job after college, if you're working in a high school, for instance, or if you're a teaching assistant and you spend money on the bulletin board, that sort of stuff, you can keep receipts, but you can deduct up to $250 called educator expenses, which is line 10 of Schedule 1. You can deduct educator expenses there. And then I'm going to talk about line 11 while we're here. Let's say you don't like my Schedule C idea. You just want to report $15,000 as your income. Line 11 of Schedule 1 says certain business expenses of reservists, performing artists, and fee-basis government official. Attach 2106. Now, 2106 is the form you have to attach to a Schedule C if you're claiming mileage and food for your travel. If you just want to feel better about putting the entire amount on line 1 of your 1040, you can still deduct it, because those three things, reservists, rural post office people, and performing artists, are usually people that don't make a lot of money, so they don't have a lot of expenses, but they spend most of what they make on housing and food and that sort of stuff. Like, for instance, the post office person buys their own gas. And so they have to buy all that gas to travel all those roads and the routes in the country. A reservist, right, has to go once a month through the reserve duty, and so there's travel, there's all kinds of expenses that they have that a normal person wouldn't have. As a theater artist, we have to travel to the work, because the work usually is where we are. So that's what those three things have in common. You can still deduct, you can't deduct it on Schedule C and here. But if you haven't decided to do the Schedule C, you can deduct it there on line 11 of Schedule 1, your expenses for traveling. And again, that would work, especially if you're being an intern where you're really not being paid. If you're a volunteer at some summer stock company, you can still deduct that from your income. Now again, if you haven't made more than $12,200, you don't have to worry about that, because you're not going to have to pay taxes anyway. Last line, there's a way to take off, there's called the American Opportunity Credit, and there's also a separate credit there. It's Form 8863, It's on line 18C of the backside of the 1040. The American Opportunity Credit Form 8863. If your parents pay for your tuition, give them the form. Anybody that pays tuition in college, in addition to the tuition and fees credit on the front side, you can also get a refund of up to $2,000 per year that you are a student. Now, there are two fees there. There's 8863 has American Opportunity Credit, and then there's another one. One of them you can take 2 years, and one of them you can take just once. And you can take two of them in 1 year, I believe. But it's up to, I know the American Opportunity Credit is up to $2,000 off your taxes, not off your income. Let's say you owe, you wind up doing all this, you wind up with $200 in taxes. The $2,000 is off your taxes, and I believe, again, you might want to talk to an accountant to make sure of this, but I believe if you have $2,000 off of your taxes and you only owe $200, you get the $1,800 to refund. If that makes any sense. I think that's in addition to the amount of money. The other things we talked about, taking it off of 2106 and Schedule C, have all been when you get to zero, you're done. Yes, or when you get to 12,200 because that's your standard deduction, you're done. But I believe the American Opportunity Credit and the other education credit are refunded to you in addition to whatever refunds and or cost you have. Yes. Again, if you're ever leery of your taxes, give me a call, send me an email. What do I do with this? Where do I put this? I will give you my best advice. I'm not an accountant, but I have done taxes many years, and I've juggled these things. And I love it when Val gets a letter from the IRS, and she's scared to death that we're going to jail. And so far, I'm batting 1,000, knock wood, on me being right. All right. So on Wednesday, or excuse me, on Thursday, your model is due. Also, your resume is due. On Thursday, we'll also talk a little bit about lighting design. See you then.